Well, let's get to our first topic of discuss today. Since the nation's independence in 1960, agriculture has been the mainstay of the nation's economy, providing the largest chunk of foreign exchange inflows into the country. Contributing about 63% of the nation's gross domestic product, the income were derived, from the export of major cash crops such as rubber, cocoa, palm oil, cashew nuts, groundnut, and cotton, amongst others. Notwithstanding the low prices that agricultural products suffered at that time, the agricultural sector managed to strive on, continually sustaining the nation's economy. But with the dramatic shift focus to crude oil exploration and the attendant oil boom of 1970, agriculture was, however, displaced as the nation's main foreign exchange earner. As a consequence, therefore, sector's contribution to the main GDP declined to 34%, just as unemployment began to make a downward movement, causing the nation to become a net importer of basic food items as agricultural productivity has fallen to its lowest ebb. Compounding food insecurity. Now, after 62 years of independence, what has really become of the sector that has once been the potential of having the highest labor force in the country? And joining me live from the United Kingdom to answer this question and many others, he is a researcher, an agribusiness economist. He's Dr. Matthew Ojo. Dr. Ojo, thank you for your time. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Tolu, and good afternoon to our viewers.
Yes, even if you are abroad, I'll still wish you well happy independence. Nigeria is our country. Now, let's start this discussion this way. A lot of stories before now, and I wasn't born then, but I read about it and I've heard a lot about it, the groundnut pyramids of this world, and how Nigeria was cashing out from proceeds from the likes of cocoa, rubber, when all of this was in abundance, and we still have that in abundance. Where did we get it wrong? Many ascribe it to the oil boom, but were we really doing well even at that time with the proceeds we were getting? Were we taking advantage of what we had with our agricultural space even at that time?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tolu, for that introduction, and also for the question you just posed. The truth is this, that agricultural sector of the Nigerian economy, at the beginning, just after we got our independence, was booming and was doing quite well. I mean, between the 1960s and 70s, the contribution of agriculture to national GDP was around 56%. And gradually, between the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, that dropped down to around maybe 30, just a little bit after 30%. Then, in the last 20 years, contribution has been down to, or hovering averagely around 22, 23% to our GDP. So if you look at the trend over the years, you would see that is a case of a decline. Ordinarily, it shouldn't have been if we had paid attention to certain fundamentals. Now, you mentioned now some of the cash crops. Agriculture, just immediately after our independence, or even before, were export focused. All right, that's why we're talking about cash crops. Okay, so there was this arrangement that ensured that what we produce is able to, is taken out to earn foreign exchange. But then we've suffered a major issue, which I refer to as neglect. Now, that neglect is what some people refer to as the oil boom that came about that made us to now forget about agriculture. But beyond when we have neglected agriculture for the oil, and then when we came to the realization that no, we shouldn't have done this, has that neglect been corrected till date? My answer will be no. It will be no, because federally, we seem to have come to that realization that, okay, we have neglected agriculture, let's go back. But then when you look at the subnationals, you will see the neglect of that agricultural sector in state governments, even in appointing people who will lead or man the agricultural sector in their states. I've seen states that you bring someone who has a background in law to head the agricultural sector. Something you wouldn't do. You won't bring someone who studied agri to go and head the justice sector in the country or in the state. So there's been a lot of misnomer which reflects that neglect that I mentioned. And apart from that, when you look at the way policies have been implemented in the agricultural sector or how it has been implemented over the years, apart from the neglect, you have this ethnicity or divide that affects the effective implementation of hitherto good policies that would have transformed the agricultural sector. Then the last of the three that are penned down is corruption that ensures that even when you have good policies and you have a goal to attend, in implementing those policies to transform our agricultural sector, parochial interest, greed, and individual, pursuit has affected the kind of growth we should have seen in that sector. I mean, look at it. A country that has an arable land of around 34 million hectares, and we are still having annual food import bill for Nigeria is in the region of $22 billion. So you just can imagine what has transpired. So we have this issue of where we want to be, where we should have been, but the realities on ground constraining the entire nation from achieving food security, not to even talk of earning tangible foreign exchange from the agricultural sector.
Beautiful stuff, Dr. Ojo. But let's talk about budget here and how government has also supported the agricultural space, because I see a space here that is our products are just being moved out, and they bring back finished products and they are sold at higher prices. So we cannot get enough value from our resources if we continue to do this. And the budget for the agricultural space has not always met up with what is expected. So what can we do about budgeting? And also, all of the supports that we get from the likes of the World Bank, African Development Bank, I can go on and on for all of these international financiers. What's been happening with all of this funding over the years?
It's interesting that you have talked about budget, but I've analyzed it on this program before. You see, the Maputo Agreement is such that ensures, I think, that African countries should set aside around 10% of their budget for agricultural development. I hope I'm right. But then budgeting over the past 20 years to the agricultural sector has been, I don't know, for want of words, has been very poor. Let me just use the word so that I don't use words that will annoy some people. And unfortunately, we budget poorly for the agricultural sector. This also reflects the neglect I mentioned. You see, there is this noise about agricultural development for employment of our youth, but then when you look at the corresponding actions, okay, it doesn't match up. So budgets and funds that comes in, okay, to help develop that sector is not properly targeted. And that is why we are not having the kind of development we supposed or we expect to have. Now, there are some 7 key things that we need to look at if we need to restructure, if we need to make development or get that same goal that we attain or we aim at in the agricultural sector. No matter the funds that come in, if you don't have a structure or a plan to utilize such funds, it fizzles out. It's just like a man that has no plan for 1 million naira. You give the man 1 million naira, he spends it anyhow. He may not be able to, and he will not be able to account for how he has spent it because that money met no plan on ground. The problem we need to address in the Nigerian agricultural sector is this. The structure with which we started the country, by now we should have reviewed it, all right? There's a need for a complete reassessment of the structure that we have in the agricultural sector of Nigeria, if we want to. Because we cannot continually use this structure and we expect to get something different. So that's a major issue. So the funding is poor, everybody knows that. Now the government says there's not enough money. And if there's going to be, if you are going to put sectors in order of priority, of course, agriculture will not come first because over the years, that neglect has been there. So if we look at the funds that are coming in, because you don't have it properly channeled, because you have the issue of ethnic divide, ethnicity issue, because you have corruption, you pump in money and you only get little, outcomes or results. So there's also this issue of policies. You see, I want to say this: Nigeria is not bereft of sound and good policies, okay, in the agricultural sector. Right from the days of the military, whether you want to talk about Operation Feed the Nation or the Grey Revolution in the 80s, or the agricultural transformation agenda under Dr. Adesina, or you have the APP, Agricultural Promotion Policy, that we just ended in 2021, or even the new one that is called NATIP. I think it's National Agricultural Technology and Information Innovation Policy. We don't have issues with all these policies. Where we have challenges is this: when it comes to implementing, because these policies are going to be implemented by this faulty structure, okay, however good they are, they get swallowed up by these three issues I've mentioned. All right, you have the greed and the corruption, you have the ethnicity issue where you say no, push it to a particular side of the country, and that is also what we need to address. Apart from the policy issue, Tolu, Nigeria wants to solve problem that they have no in-depth understanding of. Data is a major problem in the Nigerian agricultural sector. Okay, if you want to know, you will probably get better data from FAO or some foreign bodies than the one you will get from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, because these people fund some NGOs who gather data for them. So these are some of the issues that have been lacking in the agricultural sector. So policies upon policies, we don't have enough information to critically assess what the issues are, and then we want to solve them just like that immediately. That is the kind of mentality that over the years has bedeviled that agricultural sector, and not just that sector alone. So many other sectors are suffering from this as well.
Many will say we haven't really put our best foot forward when we comes to value addition. Again, now I'm going to be specific: processing, food wastage, and storage. How do we begin to change this narrative? Or what do you think whoever becomes the CEO of Nigeria by next year after the elections, what do you think can change the narrative around processing, wastage, and of course, storage?
Yes, I think the next CEO, like you mentioned, of the country has a lot to do, because this is a country of over 200 million people and still counting, and we need to feed ourselves. So what I will say is this: in terms of originally, if the agricultural sector was export focused, all right, that's why we were able to have crops like the rubber, the cashew, the cocoa, and the likes. And you could see some of the things that came out of that in terms of development. How have we progressed, or how can we take this forward? If you go down to the rural areas and see where these farmers farm, look at where their farms are, and look at where the point of pickup for their produce are located, you will weep for this country, okay? And they have to struggle to move them to a centralized place before they get loaded to trucks to go to where they will sell in market. We may need to start thinking of cottage industries around where some of these major crops are produced, so they can be a kind of uptake for this produce and then processed as well as then exported. So if we have issues around producing enough for us to eat, we can also focus on how do we produce to take out. And when you start thinking like that and you build in structures to address such, then you see state governments planning and then designing their agricultural plan around what they have comparative advantage of producing. I keep on saying this, that state government, they are to be blamed even for the neglect of agriculture in this country, not just the federal government. Because when you have a state government that has a proper plan and implements it around agricultural development in their states, 36 states for God's sake, and you have each state contributing, we have a booming economy in terms of food production and also export. But you don't have that. So cottage industry is missing. Then we also have the roads, the feeder roads, the rural roads, so that it can be easy to get to market. Food produce won't get spoiled if they are easily transported to where they are needed, all right? Then in terms of storage, state government also needs to attract private investment in that area. These are things that can be done. But if there's a word that keeps on recurring, it is that word that I term neglect, because they don't prioritize agriculture. Why? They want to undertake projects that they can easily probably steal from, or that they feel that people can quickly see what they have done. Agriculture is not like that. It takes time for its fruits to start coming out. And then if you don't take care of it, it also takes time for it to start, the fruit of its decline to start showing. So these are the things we need to do. Data is important. Technology is important. Research is important. Funding, I didn't put funding as first, because if we don't do what we ought to do and we pump money, some people will see it as free money and they go away with it. So when we have properly put all these things in place, funds will have things to address and it can come in. All these things need to be put together. But honestly speaking, going forward, focus should be on each state. When we were under the regional system, regions were producing, okay? Regions were producing, and agricultural policies should not be done in Abuja alone. It should be done in conjunction with the state government and the commitment of both the state governor and whoever is the commissioner of agriculture. These are the things we are lacking and we are not doing. Countries that don't have up to 2 million arable lands are excelling agriculturally. I think we need to look at things and how we can do them differently.
In 2 minutes, do you think rail can help address this transport issue as we try to, look for any other sustainable kind of transport mode for movement of our food produce?
Of course it can. But let me ask you, since the federal government started renovating the rails or tried to bring out the rails, now look at the rail line that cuts across maybe from Abuja, all right, or from Kaduna down to Lagos. And look at the number of states that rail cuts across. The question you and I will ask is this: since they started that project, how many state governments have looked at the agricultural hubs within their states and tailored roads towards the rail station that cuts across or passes across their states? These are the forward-looking thinking we are expecting, administrators or governors or commissioners to think of. But everybody waited. The federal government has the rail and is only for transporting human beings. Go and see the roads in the rural areas, especially in the rainy season. I've worked with farmers in the rural areas, and there are times where the vehicle we took to some rural areas got stuck because of this same neglect. So the only way we can change the narrative, Tolu, is that when we start seeing agriculture as not just a place you can put anybody, and you bring an engineer, you put him there, you bring a lawyer, you put him there, you bring someone that has nothing and no inkling about what agriculture is all about, and you use the Commissioner of Agriculture or Minister of Agriculture as a political compensation. These are the things we are saying. You put square pegs in round holes, and you want your agricultural development to happen in how many years? It won't. So when we start to think rightly, when we start to use data, when we start to use technology, and we are forward-looking in our planning, then our agriculture can start having a fresh breath of air. I don't know how else we can get a new result when we want to keep on doing the same old thing.
Same. Thank you so much. Dr. Matthew Ojo joined us from the United Kingdom. He's a researcher and agribusiness economist. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your day. We sincerely appreciate your time.
Thank you, Todo.